So welcome everyone to part 3 of our South Carolina Realtors training on ZIP Form 6. Today we're going to look at the ZIP Form 6 clauses in more detail because they are a great time saver in your transactions. So for today's training we're going to see how you can save time filling out standard information. We don't want you ever having to retype paragraphs worth of legal and brokerage text. So we want to have you using these clauses so you can ensure you have the required language for your forms, and it's easy for you to fill in that legal and brokerage text. And I'll give you a little secret. It doesn't have to just be legal text. It can be any type of standard text that you would like to insert into your forms for your transactions. So you might even have some standard language that you use as an agent, and you'll be able to use the clauses to insert that into your forms at any time. So it's a great shortcut to know about on ZIP Form 6. And it's a great way to kind of get around the fact that we have lookup fields for the shorter fields that you're filling in, like address, city, and state, but there isn't anything like that for the longer fields. Well, the clause editor takes care of that by allowing you to insert this standard text anywhere you have a longer field in ZIP Form. So in today's training, we're going to talk about first how to insert these clauses into a form. We'll talk about the Edit tab and the Clauses button on that Edit tab. We'll even take a look at putting more than one clause into a field. We're going to then look at how you can create your own clauses. I'll give you some tips and shortcuts that you can use in creating clauses. We're going to select the category so that it's easy to file these clauses away and find them later on. We'll give it a convenient name that we can look up later, and we'll enter in some clause text. And finally, at the end of the training, we're going to talk about managing your clauses, how to go back and update them, edit them, even remove them if you need to. So with that in mind, let's jump on over to ZIP Form 6. I'm going to go ahead and sign into ZIP Form 6, and we're going to get ready to start working in clauses. So I have signed in to my ZIP Form 6 account, and as you may remember from our earlier trainings, I can open up any of these transactions by clicking the Open button under the Transaction menu, or I could start a new transaction or simply jump directly over to the forms. Let's go ahead straight over to the forms right now. Now here in your forms you have plenty of opportunities to enter in information. So I'm going to take some of the forms from the South Carolina Library, and I'm going to open them up to start adding some clauses. Now I'm using one of the shortcuts we learned earlier. I'm holding down the Control key and then clicking Add Selected Forms in order to add more than one form at a time. Remember our other shortcut from our training last month where we added a template. We could also use that template to have any standard clauses that you always have in all of your transactions. So we can use these clauses throughout the files. We can fill them in very quickly and easily. So let's take a look at the clauses for this addendum. In our addendum, we've got all these lines of text that we want to agree to. We want to make sure it's the correct and standard language, and we also want to make sure that if we're going to be using this correct and standard language in more than one transaction or file, we can quickly access it at any time. And that's where clauses come in. So your first step to using a clause is to click on the field you'd like to fill in. When you click on this field, it's going to allow you to insert text in this field. So we could begin typing right away. But that gets rather tedious. So instead, we can insert a clause. And to insert a clause, we're going to go over to the Edit menu and click on the Clauses button. So this Clauses button is right here under the Edit menu. And we can click on the Clauses button at any time, and we're given a selection of clauses of saved text that we can select from at any time. Now these clauses can be created in 3 different ways. They could be created by you as the agent. They could be created by your office manager if you have a brokerage account, or they could be created by your brokerage if you have a brokerage account. Many of you will simply have these agent clauses, but never fear, you can easily create them at any time, so we can always have them available in our transaction. If you would like to filter the clause that you are selecting, use this select menu. Right now I'm looking at all of my clauses, but I could select to only look at my agent clauses. So that will give me only the clauses that I have created. And then I can filter these further by category. You have categories for these clauses so that it's easy to find the category of clause that you need. So I've got addendums, a condition of the property, and legal descriptions. Each of these categories, such as addendums, has multiple clauses or can have multiple clauses associated with it. So I have a broker addendum, I have a financial addendum, I have a good faith deposit, and you'll notice as I am clicking on each of these clauses, it pulls up different text in the clause area. So you can easily select the clause text and then click Apply to insert that text into the field you've selected. Remember, in this case, let me just move this up a minute, that will be into our addendum field, and we can tell it will insert into this field because that field is highlighted. It's highlighted in a different color, letting us know that's the active field we're working on in the form. So let's click Apply. I click Apply, and all of that text from our clause is inserted into this field, so we can quickly begin working in it and editing or updating that information. Because you can go through and you can make changes to this clause that has just been inserted. So once it's placed here in your form, it becomes part of the text of this form and can be edited just like normal text in this form. So we could remove part of this text if we need to. We could update. Let's change this day. Maybe it's due in 4 days of the offer. We can go ahead and enter in additional text if we'd like. So you can type out additional text if you wish. And you could even add additional clauses. Let's say that we would like to add another clause right here between the good faith deposit clause and the text I just typed, see Addendum 2. To do that, all I need to do is click so that my cursor appears between those two, come back up to Clauses, select a different clause, let's go ahead with a condition of the property clause, and click Apply Clause. And that text too is entered here into that field. So this works in any of your fields in zip form. It works in all of your addendums as well as any of the other contracts with text you would like to fill out. Now, as you're filling out this information, you will notice at some point you might run out of room. So we still have the standard spacing and the standard number of lines for each addendum and for each section of the contract. We're going to keep those because these contracts are formatted in such a way that they will print out on a single sheet of paper. That makes it a lot easier to share these contracts, print them out, get them signed, and so on. So we don't expand the field or change the way the field looks in any way, but there's an easy solution. If you find yourself running out of room, we've got plenty of addendums here for South Carolina members, so you can always say, see Addendum 2 or Addendum 3, and so on. So you can reference other addendums to add additional text. That's exactly the same as you would do if you were writing this out by hand and you ran out of room in that particular field. So we treat them the same way because we're still printing these out from time to time, and we want to make sure that everybody is looking at the same contract because that makes it a lot easier to find the text and information in that contract. So now we've entered in these clauses, we're ready to go in our transaction, we've got all of the standard language we need. But what if we go to insert a clause, we click on the field, we click on the clauses menu, and we can't find the clause that we need. So maybe there's an addendum that you're looking for that just has not been created yet. So it hasn't yet been added in, which might be the case if you're just starting out using clauses. How do you get that text here in ZipForm? Well, we have the New Clause button right here on this page to make it easy for you to create a new clause at any time. So we can click New Clause, and when we do so, we can select the level. I'm an agent, so it'll be an agent clause. And we could select a category. Now you can type in a new category. So if you don't have any categories, you could type one in, or use the drop-down arrow to select a category from that list. Let's go ahead and type in a new clause. That gives us a category, and now I can add in clauses to the farmland category so I can easily find all of my clauses about farmland in one location. So this just makes it a lot simpler, keeps you organized, and makes it so you don't have to go through lists and paragraphs of information to find exactly what you need. And the same goes for the title. Again, once you select this category, then you'll be selecting the title. So make sure you select a title or enter in a title that will be easy for you to identify at any time. So now we have required addendum text for farm property. That seems pretty clear. If it's something that's required by your brokerage or required by law or required by a certain area, you might say required in this county or required in a certain area or required in a certain type of transaction. So the title will help you as you're going through, as you're trying to make sure you're filling out your clauses and your forms correctly. So feel free to update that, enter in any code or other information that you might find useful or handy. You might even enter in information about where you're putting the clause. So if the clause belongs in a specific form or addendum, you might put in that form's name or code so that you can easily find that clause later on. Then we come to the clause text. Now you can type out as much or as little as you need. You could have a few sentences, a few words, or a few paragraphs in your clause. Just remember that it will need to fit in the area that you're anticipating putting this clause into. So let's type out a little bit of information for this clause. So we can type out that clause right here in this area. But you'll notice there are two things we don't have when we're doing these clauses. When you're typing out these clauses, there's no spell check and there's no automatic formatting. So here's a little trick I use. I like to open up Word or any other program, and I like to go ahead and type out my clause using Word or another editing program so that I can quickly go through and type out my clause, getting the advantage of grammar check, spell check, and all of that. So I'm going to go ahead, I've opened up Word, and I'm going to type out my clause. And once I've typed out my clause, now I have the advantage of automatic formatting, spell check. I can know I spelled everything correctly. I can highlight this clause, and I can use those handy buttons that also exist in Word as well as in zip form. I could use the cut, copy, and paste options. Now you might also remember that in our earlier trainings we learned that if you right-click on something you can get a shortcut menu. Well, that applies even in Word. So in Word I could cut, copy, or paste information. Let's go ahead and copy this information. And now that I've copied that information, I could close or minimize my Word document. And I can come here to my clause text, and I can again right-click to cut, copy, or paste information. So remember, if you right-click, you can cut, copy, and paste information from Word into the zip form clause. By the way, if you're using a Macintosh computer, an Apple computer, you can Control-click in order to get that right-click menu. So now we have our clause. We know it's spelled correctly. We know we're using proper grammar. It's especially handy if you're typing out more than a few paragraphs. You can also use that copy and paste trick if you are taking clause text directly from an email or other instructions from your broker and inserting it here in the clause area. So you can do that from an email, from a PDF, from other instructions from your broker, so that you have the exact text you need for the clause. When you're done, click the Save and Exit button. This is going to save and exit this new clause window. If you do not wish to have the clause at all, you could click Close. That will exit out of that window without saving anything on that clause. So let's go ahead and click Save and Exit. Now we have additional information here in our clauses. It's updated instantly with this new category, farmland, and we have the title, required addendum text for farm property. That's the only one in there right now, but we could add additional clauses and insert more clauses into our transaction as needed. And once you've selected the correct clause that you've just entered in, you can click Apply to add that into your transaction as well. So we can place these clauses anywhere within the text fields of our forms, and it's an easy way to fill out these blank text fields with the required information. Now, as you're moving through these clauses and as you progress, as time goes on, rules change, your text might change, you might need additional text, and we can go ahead and click on clauses at any time to edit or update these clauses so that that text continues to be accurate. If I click on clauses, I can select the category and select the clause, and then click Edit to edit and update this clause as needed. So I could add additional information. And click Save and Exit one more time to update that clause. So when we've updated that clause, when we click Apply, it will insert that new clause language as well. Now, you'll notice when I inserted that new clause language, something funny happened right here. This agreement was cut in half. That's because my cursor happened to be in the middle of a word when I clicked Insert Clause. So that is something you want to be aware of, and just be careful when you're typing out these clauses that you insert the cursor where that clause needs to go. So as you can see, as you're progressing through your transactions, if you save these clauses, you'll be able to use them again and again in your transactions. You'll be able to insert text right there into your clauses, and you'll be able to go ahead and have everything you need in your transactions. Now there's one final way of editing and updating these clauses. To see that, I'm going to go back to the Home menu. On our home menu, the menu that we see when we first sign in to Zip Form 6, there's something called the Clause Manager. The Clause Manager tab, much like the template list, gives you a second area where you can manage and update these clauses. So, here's a tip for you. Since you're just starting out and you might not have any clauses in your transactions or available to use in your transactions, you might come straight to the Clause Manager. And if you know exactly what types of clauses you need, you can go ahead and enter them in by selecting a category. When you select a category, you could choose Add New to type in a new category, or you could choose an existing category. Let's choose that farmland category. Now we have the choice of adding a new clause. That would give us the clause title field, so we can fill that in. And we can type in new clause text. Click Save to save your changes. Now, since you are first starting out in adding these clauses, remember you might not have any clauses and you might not even have any categories. Not to fear. You can always click Add New to add new categories, or remember, on our clause editor, simply start typing to add or insert in that clause category. So you will need to add a few categories if you don't already have them, and then you can begin filling out your clauses for these categories. Just remember to save as you proceed. Now from this Clause Manager, we also have the opportunity to look at clauses we've already created. Do that by selecting a category from the drop-down list, selecting the clause itself by clicking on the button next to the clause, and updating the clause text, then clicking Save to save your changes. Now you'll notice there are two other buttons we could use here. We could delete a clause. So if it no longer applies at all, we can select the clause. Let's select one from our addendums. And I can click Delete in order to delete that clause. Just be careful once you've deleted the clause. If we go back to addendums, you'll notice it's deleted. We cannot recover it at any time. So do be careful if you are deleting those clauses. When you're done with the Clause Manager, as long as you've saved your changes, if you've made any recently, you can go back to the transaction list by clicking on the Transaction List button. So let's review what we covered today in clauses, and then we'll take any questions you might have. So we talked about inserting clauses into the form. Remember, you can add saved text at any time by clicking on the Clauses button, selecting a clause, and clicking Apply. Remember, when you do so, you're applying the clause to the text field in your form where you've placed your cursor, so the text field you clicked on or selected. So in order to add the clause to that field, click the Clauses button. That will pull up the clause editor where you can select a clause and click Apply in order to add that clause into your transactions. So clauses are an easy way to keep track of legal, financial, and brokerage required text, or really any other text you would like to fill in. They can be used to fill in any field in Zip Form 6, but remember, when you're filling in these fields, you have to have enough room to insert the clause, or it will be cut off. If you don't have enough room on that particular field, you could always say, see Addendum 1, Addendum 2, and so on, and insert the text into your addendum instead. These clauses are especially useful for those addendums and terms that you need to enter and you might find they're best used by copying and pasting text from Word or another text editing program, or from a flyer or an email or other standard text you might have received from your broker. Now you also have the opportunity to create clauses. Again, you can use the Edit menu, click the Clauses button, and click New Clause to add a new clause if you don't already have one. That also gives you the opportunity to add or update categories if you need to. And as you're going through, if you'd like to manage these clauses, you can do so from that Edit menu or from your Clause Manager right here on ZipForm 6. So it's right on the home page if you don't wish to go over to your Forms page. So that brings us to the end of our training for clauses. If you need additional help or you would like to review anything we've covered in today's training or previous trainings, you can always visit the Help tab. That's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it gives you frequently asked questions, a knowledge base with handy tips and step-by-step instructions, as well as how-to videos, including how-to videos on adding clauses and using clauses in your transactions. Now, of course, we also have this training as well as our previous trainings available at screaltors.com. So you can visit your association website in order to sign in to ZipForm 6 and in order to review any of the trainings we've covered so far. And keep coming back. We're going to be having one training every month informing you of useful tools like the clauses, or like last month's training on templates, or the previous month's training, which gave us a broad overview and tips and tricks on filling out forms. You may also visit ZipLogix.com for additional help and information, and our support.ziplogix.com website for additional training and support. Now we've got a couple of great questions typed in here, and feel free, if you're on the live training, to go ahead and type in your questions by expanding the GoToWebinar panel and entering in your questions on the questions panel. So, our first question comes from Chris. Chris asks, can clause text be added anywhere within a form or just in the text fields? Well, you're entering your clauses just in the text fields. I'm going to go ahead and open up ZipForm 6, maybe explain that just a little bit more. We're going to go over to the Forms section, and I'm going to go ahead and open up something you're probably all familiar with, the agreement to buy and sell residential real estate. Now, on this form, you have a lot of standard text. This is called standard or boilerplate text. This text does not change. This text could be lined out or highlighted using the strikeout or highlighter quick tools, but it cannot be changed or edited. We do that for a few reasons. One of the reasons is all South Carolina realtors are familiar with this text and this language. So if you have special text that you're inserting in or adding in, it is best added in a space that allows for that special text. Whether it is a field on the form itself, such as the personal property field, or added in as an addendum. It's best conveyed as special text because that way you know the other agent and subsequently their client will pay more attention to that text. And since it's something that's outside of a standard contract, you want to be sure that they are paying more attention to that text and reacting to it or treating it as it should be treated. So that's why we enter in our addendums and we enter in our clauses into the text fields and not into the standard boilerplate text. That way we make sure we're all using the same contracts that have been reviewed and are keeping up with current regulations in our area. And we also know when to pay special attention because text is entered in a special field. right? And related to that, Neil asks, can we please quickly demonstrate or review the strikeout and highlighter tools so that we know how to use those on standard text as well? Absolutely. So here in our standard boilerplate text, we have two tools that allow us to update or emphasize that text a little bit more clearly. Please do make sure before using these tools or when using these tools that you are always following your brokerage rules when it comes to using and striking out or lining out standard information on your forms, or when it comes to highlighting standard information on your forms. Your broker rules and legal requirements may vary according to the region that you're in. So with that in mind, let's take a look at how we can do that. We can go ahead and strike out information by clicking on the S with a line through it. This strikeout button will allow you to line out information that does not apply to this transaction. So we can go ahead and line out information if it's something that, for instance, we might be adding an addendum for. If I'm going to require that this be turned in by 5 p.m., if that is allowed and legal in my area and brokerage, I could line out information and annotate it later on. But if I would like to still emphasize this section, I might highlight information as well. So to use the highlighter, it's much the same as the strikeout button. When you click on the highlighter tool, it gives you a highlighter where you can click and drag to highlight information on the form. So if we need to highlight information, we can click and drag to add that highlight. Now let's suppose that something has changed and we no longer need the strikeout, or we've discovered we should not have the strikeout. We can go ahead and click that S one more time and click and drag to remove a strikeout. So you can click and drag to add a strikeout or click and drag to remove it at any time. That way, you are able to have exactly the information that you need on your forms. And it's emphasized once more because it's something different. It's something out of the ordinary. And we don't want people going through and expecting something to be there and agreeing to something that is not the case. So make sure that you always update your forms and stay in line with your brokerage rules and the legal requirements in your area. So for instance, if I must have that strikeout approved, so if I sat there with a ruler and lined out information, if that must be approved by all parties, you will still need to have that strikeout approved by all parties. So if you have any questions about lining out information, it is best to talk to your broker and your real estate lawyer to make sure that you are in compliance at all times with your local regulations. So let's continue with some of these other questions now that we've demonstrated real quickly the line out and highlighter functions, and we understand better why we are inserting these clauses into an addendum rather than typing them out as part of the standard text in the form. Now, Eric would like to know, when we go from Word, is the text uniform when it's copied and pasted, or will it copy your style from Word? Well, again, to make sure it's easy for you to read and identify these forms quickly, we're always using the same font when filling in the forms. However, there is one thing that when you copy from Word will be copied over. So the styling, the font, none of that will be copied over, but you can copy over paragraph breaks. So if you make different paragraphs, that will be copied over and inserted into your clauses as well as your fields if that applies in that field. So if it's available in that field. And Susan would like to know, what if I have no categories? Well, let's take a look at that. In our clauses, if you don't have any categories here, you can create a new clause and add in a new category at the same time. So when you click New Clauses, which may be the case for many of you, you will see the Please Enter or Select from Existing. So if there's nothing existing, you can always enter in a new clause category, just like we did with the farmland category. So I could add in a new clause, and once I've saved this clause, once I click Save and Exit, that new category will exist for my clauses. And click Save and Exit to save that new category. And then you'll have a category there in your drop-down list. So this way you have an easy access to all of your categories, and you can quickly create these categories and these clauses all in the same step. Right? And Susan also asks, do I need to have the same categories that you are using in yours? No, your categories can be arranged how you would like to use these clauses. I've created these categories because I find them easy and useful when working in my properties. But you might find different names or different ideas for the categories you would like to have. So feel free to label these categories as you wish them to appear. You don't have to follow the examples that we've listed today. And speaking of examples, Doug asks, is there a list of standard clauses or clause categories that I might create or that are provided for myself or a new agent when entering in these clauses? Well, since clauses are so specific, not just to state but to region and even sometimes to county, you will want to ask your broker and perhaps your real estate lawyer if there are any standard clauses you would like to use. In other ideas or categories, you might also add in standard text that banks require you to insert for specific properties. So if you have bank-owned properties or properties where banks are being very specific about loan requirements, you might insert that standard text by copying and pasting the text provided to you by the bank. That way, you'll be able to easily and quickly pull it up the next time you're dealing with that bank. All right, and we've got a great question to close out this question section. Dave says, I missed parts 1 and 2. Is there a way to go back and see them? Absolutely. We have parts 1 and 2 recorded for you and available at screaltors.org. You can go at any time to screaltors.org or screaltors.com, and you'll see right here, of course, we see the Zip Form 6 webinar series. That's how you signed up for today's webinar. You can also review the rest of our webinar series by clicking on the Zip Form link. And South Carolina Realtors has helpfully provided you with the recordings as well as the slides for all of these training sessions that we've completed. So our first one, Tips and Tricks Getting Started. We can download the slides easily to review or follow along and take advantage of the notes that are there in the slides to review the training. And we can also see immediately this training that South Carolina is hosting for you. You'll also see the recording for number 2, Tips and Tricks, the templates, where again you can download the slides at any time or view the recording. Now as we proceed, this training will also be posted online within 1 day of the training being completed. And we have additional trainings coming up. You can attend our next training on April 7th in order to learn how to send forms. We're going to be talking about printing, emailing, and faxing forms. We'll even take a quick look at e-sign tools included in Zip Form 6. So keep those on your calendars. They are exciting trainings that are going to be occurring every month this year so that you can get the best out of your member benefit ZIP Form 6. And if there are no further questions, I'd like to thank you again for joining us. It's always a wonderful pleasure to be training you in South Carolina. I hope you enjoyed today's training and our other trainings in the webinar series. Please feel free to visit us at ZipLogix.com. And remember, sign in at screaltors.com, and don't forget to tell them how much you appreciate their work for you as members. Thanks again, and I hope you have a wonderful and beautiful day. Take care.